In the previous section, I used Pick Object to select, for example, this wheel, and then use the tools on the Transform palette and the mouse buttons to move freely in the XYZ directions. But now we're going to start a new car project. So I'll begin by going up to the User Data directory and selecting the Fundamentals 2 project and setting this as my current project, which takes me to the Y directory of Fundamentals 2. And here I'll open F2.1, which is a dimensions file, which only has a canvas plane in it. So let's just pick that and do a look at. And you can see that all we've got is some dimensions for a basic package or layout for the car. So 1500 for the track, 2420 for the wheelbase. So now I want to work accurately to those dimensions. So I'll start by showing my grid again so that I can see the X, Y and Z directions. And then down here on the Curves palette, I have a Key Point Curves toolbox. And these are our standard drafting curves like lines, circles and arcs. But I'm also going to check my construction options. And we're using the general CAD settings. And below this is the units section. And you can see that the main units are set to millimeters. And in fact, all of these presets are set to millimeters. But if you wanted to change that, you'd need to choose the user-defined settings, and then choose something like inches or meters if that's what you need. But I'm going to leave it at millimeters and go back to the general CAD settings. So now we know we're working in millimeters, but we still don't really have a feel for the scale on the screen. So down here on the construction palette, I have the grid preset tool. And it's currently set at 100 millimeters, but for a car I might want to change that to a meter, and then just do go. So now we know that each of these grid lines is a meter. And if I just go into the 4 windows now, and I'll use the F9 hotkey, I have another option which is to display the grid labels. So here in the 2D windows I get the grid spacing displayed numerically. But I'm just going to turn that off for now as it doesn't display in the perspective view, and that's the one I'm going to use for creating my layout. I'll start by creating a line for half the front axle, and I'll start it at the origin. So I'll choose a straight line, and the prompt line asks us for the start point. So I'll just use grid snapping with the Alt key to snap to the origin. And then the prompt line says to enter the end point, and this time I'm going to use coordinates. So I want to come out this way, which is in -y. So in the prompt window, I'll type 0 for x, space or comma, -750 for y, and then 0 for z and enter, and I get my line. So let's now do the rear axle, and I could just copy and paste this line, but I'm going to create a new line and use coordinates again. So for my start point, I want 2420 in x, and then 0 in y, and 0 in z. But there's a shortcut. These are called the trailing zeros, and when they're at the end I can leave them off. So I can just hit enter now and I get my start point. And now I'm asked for the end point. And I'll want to come out to here. And in my prompt line it says ABS, and absolute mode always measures from the origin. So I would need to type 2420 and -750. But there is an alternative, which is to use relative mode, which I can switch to by typing R and return. So just typing A, return, or R, return switches the mode. And this measures from the last position. So relative would just be 0 space -750. And I don't need to type the trailing 0 here for Z. And that then gives me the rear axle line. So you simply choose relative or absolute, whichever one is easier when you're typing in coordinates. So I'll just create a new layer using the object lister, and I'll call that layout. And then I'll pick the 2 lines and assign them. And that means that I can use the symmetry on the layer to get the full axle width. Now once you've created some geometry, you might want to check it. So down here on the locators palette, there's all sorts of measurement tools. So I'll pick the distance measure. And now it's important to be accurate, so I'll use point snapping to snap to the beginning and to the end of my line. Now if I want to measure the whole width on this rear axle, I don't have a point showing at this mirrored end. So instead of point snap, I'll use a curve snap. So I'll hold the Control and Alt keys down and then click and drag the cursor beyond the end to lock it exactly onto that end. And then I can do the same at this end. Now there's an interesting difference between using the point snap and the curve snap. So if I scale the curves, you'll notice that the curve snap has associated the locator to the line, whereas the point snap's just been located at the point in space. And so I'll typically use the curve snap even when there are points showing. So in the next tutorial we'll create some circles for the wheel positions. And then here are the key tools for working accurately with dimensions.